This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Low growth world, a leading international group warns that the global economy risks falling into a trap, and it is urging world policymakers to act now.
Tapping the brakes, Americans did not buy as many cars last month as they have been, as the auto industry undergoes a big shift.
Storm surge threat. 7 million homes are in harm's way, resulting in potential damage of $1.5 trillion as hurricane season officially begins. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Wednesday, June 1st.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Stocks made a big U-turn to start the month of June. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we begin tonight with the global economy, which the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says is vulnerable to another deep downturn and warns that urgent government action is needed. Those global growth concerns were also evident in the latest data out of China. The world's second largest economy reported lingering weakness in its manufacturing sector. And here in the U.S., while things are better, the economy isn't yet firing on all cylinders. Steve Leisman explains.
Dismal global growth is set to continue this year and next unless governments around the world stop relying on central banks and low interest rates and start acting themselves. That was the main message in a report today from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a global group that brings together market and non-market economies. In its latest forecast, the OECD says global growth will remain just 3% this year, or the same as 2015, and rise only marginally to 3.3% in 2017. Growth is seen weakening in the U.S. to below 2%, and there was little change in the subpar outlooks for Europe and for Japan. The OECD even slashed its forecast for China by nearly 0.5 point to 6.5%. The OECD calls it a low growth trap.
The reason why we're in a trap is because there's insignificant aggregate demand. In other words, business investment says, well, I'm not going to invest and hire people and give them wages because I don't see any demand out there. And then, of course, since they don't hire and they don't generate wages, in fact, there isn't. So it's a low growth trap.
The OECD concluded that low interest rates from central banks are not enough to break out of the trap. They urge governments to borrow, spend, and invest.
We have to bring in the second policy instrument, which is fiscal policy, and we know that countries now have the opportunity to borrow at very, very low interest rates. So they should do that, engage in the types of infrastructure projects that they've put on hold for the last 8 years.
Those policies are controversial in many countries where there's concern about deficits and paying back the debt and paying the interest on the debt once rates rise. There's also widespread doubt about the effectiveness of such borrow and spend policies to spark growth. But some say they could break the trap.
So if we actually structured a fiscal plan in a way that caused the economy to grow more in line with its historical record, there is a case to be made that those debt figures would look a bit less, because instead of growing 3 to 4% nominal, we're growing perhaps 5, even maybe 6% nominal.
Here in the U.S., the data has been a bit better than perhaps suggested by the OECD. A key manufacturing index came in better than expected by Wall Street, though it still suggests only modest growth. And construction spending fell more than expected. The Fed's Beige Book indicated modest growth across the country, but some pickup in hiring and wages. Most data has pointed to a stronger second quarter, and markets are bracing for the Friday jobs report, which could give a green light for a Federal Reserve rate hike later this month. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Leisman.
On Wall Street, concerns about the global economy pressured stocks at the start, but by the afternoon, the losses gone, and stocks closed out the first trading day of June with small, and I do mean small, gains. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose a whopping 2 points. That's, what is that, 1/100%? It had been down as much as 122 earlier in the day. There's your U-turn we talked about. And the NASDAQ added 4 points, and the S&P added 2.
Well, the auto industry hit a bit of a speed bump in May. Sales at some of the world's biggest automakers came in below expectations. GM sales in the U.S. were down 18% last month. Ford dropped nearly 6%, while Fiat Chrysler sales did rise, but only about 1%. Despite the pullback, the overall pace of sales remains relatively healthy. But as Phil LeBeau reports, there's one type of vehicle that's no longer in demand.
Make no mistake, America's appetite for new vehicles is shifting. May auto sales for the major automakers slumped compared to the same month a year ago. One reason? Cars are no longer in demand. Low gas prices have hit hybrids like the Toyota Prius. But other cars, like the Dodge Dart, are finding it hard to compete against crossovers, SUVs, and pickups, which are red hot. How hot? Last month, Fiat Chrysler sold 3 times as many Jeeps as it did all of its cars combined. This has become a double-edged sword for automakers. They make more money selling trucks and SUVs. And while those models are more fuel efficient than in the past, there is the concern about what happens if gas prices spike higher and Americans quickly move back to wanting cars. Against this backdrop, the overall rate of auto sales remains relatively strong, though slightly below the record pace the industry set last year. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Phil LeBeau.
Meantime, Ford is recalling more vehicles for potentially defective airbags. It's all part of a nationwide expansion of the ongoing Takata airbag recall. Ford's move covers nearly 2 million vehicles in North America and focuses on the passenger side front airbag inflators.
Some of the world's largest oil exporters will meet in Vienna tomorrow. There's renewed hope that OPEC will revisit a cap on production. Even the possibility of production quotas helped crude prices shed most of their declines today, and they settled down just 0.2%. But as Brian Sullivan reports from Vienna, investors are hoping the meeting brings answers to their many questions.
Heading into the first of its 2 annual meetings here in Vienna, Austria, there are 3 big questions that OPEC must answer. Number 1, will the run back to $50 for oil be enough to satisfy many of the most cash-strapped OPEC members, such as Venezuela, Nigeria, and Angola? In the media scrum on the way into his hotel earlier today, the Angolan oil minister suggested that 50 might not be enough, but 60 maybe.
The 10 days is okay, but maybe $60 per barrel.
The second big question is whether or not Saudi Arabia and Iran can put aside their long-simmering political and religious differences and come to any kind of a deal on either limiting or cutting output. Both have been engaged in a fierce market share around the world, particularly in China. And remember, the Saudis will be sending a new oil representative to OPEC for the first time in 25 years. It is a big wild card, and the man is largely seen as just a proxy for the King of Saudi Arabia's son. The third question is, will OPEC survive as a cartel? Many are saying that their inability to strike any kind of a deal over the last few years means that the cartel has been dramatically weakened. We'll see tomorrow if they can reassert their dominance, because what happens here in the building behind us will impact the price of oil, which means it'll impact the price that you pay at the gas pump. For Nightly Business Report in Vienna, Austria, I'm Brian Sullivan.
In a CNBC survey, more than 70% of those polled say there's a very low chance of a production freeze at tomorrow's OPEC meeting. But the analysts and traders and major energy funds who were surveyed also say that no action from OPEC could have an adverse effect on the market.
The Gulf Coast region, home to the nation's oil rigs, by the way, as well as the Atlantic coast, are getting ready for hurricane season. It officially kicks off today. Forecasters say it will be slightly more active than normal. The risk to coastal real estate is already high and, according to a new report, rising. Diana Olick explains why.
The sun is out now, but storms will surely be brewing over the next few months, and nearly 7 million homes are standing in harm's way, according to a new report from CoreLogic. The numbers are rising because builders keep building and buyers keep buying. These homes represent a collective $1.5 trillion in potential reconstruction costs. The risk to homes with that coveted water view is highest in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, where the coastlines are longest. Louisiana is particularly susceptible to flooding because of its low-lying flatlands that stretch inland. The risk to cities relies more on density and home values. 67% of the nearly 7 million homes at risk are in just 15 metro markets. They account for 68% of the cost to rebuild. Those costs can vary dramatically depending on where you are. Take Miami, for example, with 780,000 homes at risk. The total cost of reconstruction comes in at $144 billion. New York City has fewer homes at risk, but the cost of reconstruction is nearly twice that of Miami because of the value of those properties and the high density of where they are. It all begs the question, why do we keep building houses that are in clear danger of destruction? The answer is more psychology than reality. Hurricanes don't hit in the same place every year, and people tend to get hurricane amnesia even just a few years after a big storm. The Jersey Shore housing market is apparently hotter than ever this summer. Sandy, after all, was nearly 4 years ago. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
Still ahead, under pressure, why the Treasury Department is cracking down and further cutting off one country from our banking system.
A congressional committee has launched an investigation into the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The panel wants to know more about how the New York Fed handled the heist of more than $80 million from accounts it maintains for the Central Bank of Bangladesh. The committee also wants to know what oversight the Fed has conducted of the so-called SWIFT system, a messaging system used by banks across the globe.
North Korea, the country that may have a link to that Fed hack, is being further cut off from the international financial system. The Treasury Department today declared North Korea a primary money laundering concern and is further isolating that country from access to U.S. banks. Eamon Javers is following the story for us from Washington. Good to see you, Eamon. So what are these new restrictions that the Treasury Department is using?
Well, this isn't finalized yet. It's called a Section 311 determination by the U.S. Treasury Department. And if it is finalized, it'll mean ultimately that U.S. banks have to do additional due diligence on any transaction that might in any way interact with North Korean finance. They say that the reason they are doing this right now is because of a determination that North Korea is involved potentially with international financial transactions that back up weapons of mass destruction transfers and proliferation around the world. So that's the concern that's being cited today. But it also comes amid this other discussion of who actually did this Bank of Bangladesh hack that hit the New York Fed for $81 million.
Sort of why now with respect to North Korea? I think you kind of answered that. But do we know anything more about who really was behind that hack into the Bangladesh bank?
We don't. I mean, what we know right now is that there is some investigators are circling around the idea of some kind of North Korean involvement here. The reason being is they found this particular software code inside the Bangladeshi system they say was similar to software code that was used in the Sony hack. And of course, the U.S. government said it was North Korea that did that one. But, and this is the big but here, all of this can be purchased out on the black market. There are cyber gangs, for example, that North Korea could have hired to do the Sony hack and not done it directly themselves. So who exactly it is that got into the Bank of Bangladesh and stole that $81 million is still a big global whodunit, Tyler.
I find it interesting they have access to the financial system at all. All right. Eamon,
that's right.
Thank you so much. Eamon Javers in Washington.
Net income at U.S. banks declined for the first time in 2 years. The reason energy loans, FDIC chairman says low energy prices have led to sharp increases in non-current loans to oil and gas producers. He added that the full impact of those loans remains to be seen. Overall net income in the first quarter for banks fell to about just $39 billion.
A wave of innovation has turned the banking industry on its head. Financial technology is changing the way that people transfer, lend, and borrow money, not just here, but around the globe. And as Eunice Yoon reports from Beijing, a dark cloud is forming over parts of this fast-growing business.
Protests like this one in Beijing are increasingly common in China. Enraged investors demanding compensation and justice after losing their savings in a failed peer-to-peer lending company called Yizhubao. These alternative investments, which match investors and borrowers online, have exploded in China, but so have the scams, casting a shadow over industry players like Sheng, who hope unconventional financing will still be a bright spot in the country's slowing economy. Sheng runs P2P lending company NCF Group, a Chinese financial technology or fintech firm.
If you look at the scandals happened, especially since the second part of last year, they are scams. They just happen to be happening in this fintech time. That did affect the confidence of the consumer, and also it did affect the attitude of the regulators.
Regulators here have been tightening rules on P2P lending, one type of financial technology. In China, with funding from state banks out of reach for many smaller companies, this up-and-coming sector has ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Despite the potential, Sheng expects 2016 to bring uncertain times, as regulators warily eye these new entrants to the country's financial world.
Regulation just started to come into play in this market, but it takes some time for the players and also the regulators to come to some sort of harmony, right? The regulator, it's very often that regulator didn't understand at the beginning. When they understand or they think they understand, they will over-regulate. So when they over-regulate, the industry or the growth will be slower. How to basically run.
The former Google employee believes no company will be immune, even the most famous brands, like Apple Pay.
I know that Apple Pay is coming to China. It's a huge Apple fan space, and I'm using Apple Pay. But actually, I don't know. Anyone who wants to enter finance sector in China, the first thing I think they need to talk to the regulator first. It's very hard, not only financial players, but any internet or technology companies to try to operate in China. It's different rules.
As for Sheng, he's bracing for an industry shakeout that he hopes will bring stability to the industry longer term.
After this half-year regulation, more people, some people may be scared or maybe have lost the confidence at the beginning, but they are coming back, or they are shifting from those shaky platforms to a more reputable, more renowned platforms. It's better to face this problem earlier than later.
As long as he can survive any potential surprises along the way. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
Strong demand for handbags and accessories helped lift results at the luxury goods maker Michael Kors, and that is where we begin tonight's market focus. That demand helped the company top sales and profit targets. It also raised its full-year earnings forecast. The retailer says it plans to focus on selling at full price and expanding in Asia. Shares of Michael Kors rose more than 6.5% to $45.55. Aggressive discounting, promotional offers weighed on results. Meantime, at Land's End, the apparel maker reported a nearly $6 million loss as well as a steep decline in sales. The CEO called those results disappointing. Shares fell more than 5.5% to $15.81. The cloud computing company Salesforce will buy business software company Demandware for more than $2.5 billion. The merger expected to increase Salesforce's yearly revenue by up to $120 million. Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff spoke about the opportunities the deal presents.
Our customers are trying to connect with their customers in a whole new way, and you know that in sales and service, in marketing, building communities, analytics, apps, IoT. Well, now they also want to be able to create their own stores as well. Online stores, physical stores, the Commerce Cloud. That's what we're going to create with Demandware. This is going to be amazing.
Shares of Salesforce off a fraction to $83.45. Demandware soared a mere 56% to finish at $74.81.
Number of analysts are bearish on Nike. Concerns over increased competition and a slowdown in retailer spending caused Morgan Stanley and Bank of America to downgrade the athletic apparel company's stock. But shares of Nike didn't really react all that much to that. They were off about 0.5% to $54.93. It was a good quarter at Cracker Barrel as the restaurant chain posted better than expected quarterly results. The company is also raising its full-year earnings forecast. And if that wasn't enough, Cracker Barrel is raising its quarterly dividend 4.5% and issuing a one-time special dividend of $3.25 a share. As a result, the stock was up more than 8% to $164.22. Lululemon's founder and largest shareholder is calling for a board shakeup at the athletic apparel company. Chip Wilson, who resigned from the board last year, issued an open letter to shareholders expressing dissatisfaction with the company's performance.
Vision is what's really missing. So if you see what Lululemon's doing, they're just rolling out stores, but they're not morphing into anything new. and they're not. They say they've got technology. They say they're doing innovation, but I might be the #1 person in the world to understand that, and I don't see it anywhere.
Shares nonetheless rose more than 1.5% to 66.17.
They are visionaries, they are innovators, and today top tech executives are talking about the future and the growing role digital technology will play in our day-to-day lives. Julia Borston reports from the Code Conference in Rancho Palos Verdes, California.
Cutting-edge technology driving conversations at the Code Conference about the challenges and opportunities in the next generation of tech. Sheryl Sandberg weighing in on the importance of constant innovation.
Facebook remains the best place in the world to get the largest audience of teens, and we're proud of that. But we also know we need to execute. We need to continue to work hard, invest, build products over a 3, 5, and 10-year time frame. We have a very long view that keep our audience and the people engaged.
Artificial intelligence is a huge topic among all of the executives here. Sandberg and Facebook's CTO Mike Schroepfer talking about the big role that AI will play in Facebook's future. Google CEO Sundar Pichai saying they're just at the beginning of building out the transformative power of artificial intelligence.
In some ways, our vision of this is we think of this as building each user their own individual Google. So we want this to be user-centric. And I think part of building a smarter system over time is to be able to understand users and be that assistant for them, be that friend for them. And I think it's going to take us time to figure this out.
Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos also talking about his massive investment in artificial intelligence, with more than 1,000 employees working on the Amazon Echo device and Alexa software, which he says is just the tip of the iceberg. He also said it's just the beginning of how Amazon will invest in content, originals and licensed shows as part of a bigger retail strategy.
From a business point of view for us, we get to monetize that content in a very unusual way, because when we win a Golden Globe, it helps us sell more shoes.
And Amazon is also using artificial intelligence to sell more shoes, with custom recommendations based on users' buying history, as technology plays an ever larger role in consumers' lives. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Rancho Palos Verdes, California.
They even know whether I've been naughty or nice. Still ahead, the ultimate man cave, where Ferraris are included, and they're on a turntable.
All right, let's look ahead. Here's what to watch for tomorrow. As we reported, OPEC will make its decision on whether to freeze oil production. The European Central Bank is meeting to discuss monetary policy, and jobless claims and ADP's report on private payrolls are due out. And those are the last labor market reports ahead of Friday's key employment report. And that is what to watch for Thursday.
And finally tonight, the man cave. Most, or at least many men, want one, a place all their own where they can relax on a recliner, a big screen TV, or 6. Robert Frank takes us to one in Orange County, California that's like none we've ever seen before.
In this super rich neighborhood in Orange County, California, when the guys get together for poker night, bragging rights are on the line. But they've figured out a way to up the ante.
There's a competition among the homeowners here to build the most amazing space for the poker game.
The owner of this mega mansion went all in and built a massive, one-of-a-kind man cave, stacking the deck with all the essentials like a full bar, wine cellar, pool table, and more than $1 million worth of electronics. He hired tech wizard Jason Voorhees to make sure all this high-priced and complex equipment works like aces.
The automation system that we have installed in this home is the same system that's installed in every Disney theme park in the world. It runs every single ride.
But what raises the stakes in this luxury fantasy land are the homeowners' rides. Lots of them.
Right now we're spinning around in the car cave.
And what a garage it is. This is the ultimate full house. 2 Aston Martins, including a DB5, also known as the James Bond car, a 1927 Bugatti, a 1930 Austin, and these 6 super rare pre-1970s Ferraris, each worth millions. All 4,000 square feet of the car cave is covered in cobblestone. The walls and ceiling are made of limestone. And when the owner wants to show off the collection, thanks to Voorhees, he can set the mood in an instant.
The lights are at the perfect museum setting. The music's usually playing 60s classic rock, like Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild and things like that.
The music is digital, but the star of the show is spinning on the turntable, a 1958 Ferrari 250 GT Tour de France. This one has European racing history, which jacks the value up to nearly $10 million. And the entire jackpot is worth more than $20 million. Which means for this homeowner, there really are no limits. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Robert Frank.
Boys and their toys.
I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah, that was just astonishing.
Would you ever take it out, though? I'd be afraid to take it out.
No, my gosh.
That's the problem. All right. Well, we will never have that problem.
No, we don't have to worry about it.
That does it for us tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sue Herrera.
I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you back here on the turntable.